It was the kind of winter morning that made the air taste like metal. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. The chapel smelled faintly of polished wood and wilted lilies, their petals already curling at the edges, as if they too had lost the will to stand upright. Rows of black-clad strangers sat scattered across the pews, their faces expressionless, eyes drifting anywhere but toward the closed casket at the front. No one cried, not even her children. Maya sat stiffly in the first pew, fingers locked together so tightly her knuckles blanched. She hadn't seen her mother in nearly 7 years, and the last words they'd exchanged had been clipped and bitter. To her right, Jordan scrolled idly through his phone, his thumb moving in lazy, practice swipes, as though he were killing time in a dentist's waiting room, rather than at his own mother's funeral. Lena, the youngest, kept her gaze fixed on the stained glass window, its fractured light spilling in pale reds and blues across her pale face. They didn't speak to each other. They hadn't in months. The silence between them felt heavier than the coffin itself. The priest droned on, reciting the same worn platitudes he'd used for countless services before this one. Beloved mother, cherished friend, devoted soul. The words slid over the siblings like water on glass. They didn't recognize the woman in that eulogy. That version of Elora was a myth, gentle, loving, endlessly patient. The Elora they remembered was different. The Elora they remembered had called too often, left too many voicemails, and asked too many questions they didn't want to answer. She'd begged for visits, pleaded for phone calls, and reminded them of birthdays they never came home for. And when the years stacked up without their presence, her voice on the phone grew smaller, quieter. Until one day, it wasn't there at all. By the time the final hymn ended, the siblings stood as 3 polite strangers, united only by the discomfort of shared blood and the unspoken weight of guilt. The lawyer approached them in the dim hallway outside the chapel. He was a tall man in an immaculate gray suit, his shoes clicking softly on the tile. "Before we proceed to the burial," he said, "there's something your mother left specifically for the 3 of you." From his briefcase, he pulled out a single envelope, thick, heavy, sealed with deep red wax. The surface was smooth, untouched, except for 4 words written in a familiar looping hand. "To my children, when I am gone." For a moment, none of them reached for it. The air between them seemed to hum, charged with something they couldn't name. Jordan was the first to break the silence. "Probably just another guilt trip," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Maya's gaze lingered on the envelope. Her mother's handwriting still had that same elegance, the kind that made even shopping lists look like poetry. Her stomach tightened. Lena stepped forward, took the envelope, and felt its weight in her hands. It was heavier than she expected. Whatever was inside, it wasn't just paper. She ran her thumb across the seal but didn't break it. Not yet. Instead, she looked at her siblings, her eyes reflecting both challenge and fear. "Do we open it now?" she asked. The question hung in the air like the breath before a confession. They didn't know it yet, but the moment that seal broke, the quiet, shame-filled distance between them would shatter. Their mother's voice, silent for so long, was about to speak louder than it ever had in life, and what she had to say would not be forgiveness. It would be a secret big enough to destroy them all. You won't believe what's inside that letter. The funeral procession had moved on to the cemetery, but the 3 siblings stood in the shadowed corridor of the chapel, huddled around the envelope like it was an unexploded device. Lena's hands shook as she slid a fingernail beneath the seal. The wax cracked with a sound far too loud in the silence, like the snap of brittle bone. She peeled it back carefully, her breath catching as the flap lifted. Inside, there was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, folded into 3 precise sections. She opened it. Her mother's handwriting was there again, smooth, deliberate, as though each letter had been written with the weight of purpose. It began without greeting. "I know you came today out of duty, not love, and I will not pretend I deserve more, but there is something you must know before you walk away from me forever." Lena's voice wavered as she read aloud. Maya leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. Jordan shoved his hands into his coat pockets, pretending to be bored, but his jaw was set tight. There is another. A fourth. One I could never tell you about. Maya's breath left her in a sharp exhale. Jordan's head jerked up. Not abandoned, not lost. Hidden. The word hidden seemed to hang in the air, pulsing like a heartbeat. Lena swallowed hard, her voice quieter now. I kept them from you, for reasons I can no longer carry. It was for your safety, for all of ours. And now that I am gone, they will come. They will want what belongs to them. Family, fortune, and maybe more. Jordan let out a short, humorless laugh. This is insane. Mom's playing games from the grave. But even as he said it, his fingers twitched at his sides. Maya's voice was tight. Why would she lie? She's dead, Jordan. What does she get out of lying now? Do not think you are safe. My absence changes everything. They will find you. The letter ended there. No name, no description, no reason for the secrecy. Only her looping signature, Elora. They stared at the page for a long moment, each of them processing the words differently. Maya felt a slow, icy dread unfurl in her stomach. Jordan felt anger rising, hot, irrational, because the dead had no right to stir up trouble for the living. Lena just felt something she couldn't name, an ache that seemed to have been waiting years for this moment. Outside, the muffled sound of shovels hitting frozen earth echoed through the walls. The burial had begun. Fourth sibling, Jordan muttered. If it's even true. It is true, Maya said flatly. Lena folded the letter carefully, tucking it back into the envelope. She said they'd come. That means they know about us. Maybe they've known for years. The thought settled over them like a shadow. Somewhere out there was someone who shared their blood, or maybe didn't. Someone Elora had chosen to protect, or to hide. And now, with her gone, that invisible barrier had been torn down. As they stepped out into the cold, the wind cut across the cemetery, lifting the edges of the black canopy over the grave. The priest's voice floated on the air, speaking blessings to a woman who had just turned their lives into a ticking clock. They didn't see the figure watching from the tree line, hands buried deep in a coat, eyes fixed on them with an unreadable expression. The figure didn't move. Not yet. Soon. But why were they hidden? The truth starts to leak next episode. The burial was over, but the siblings didn't linger. They left the cemetery separately, as if proximity alone might cause more damage than the truth already had. The letter weighed on all of them, literally in Lena's purse, but also in the tightness in their chests. 2 days later, they met again. It was Maya who called them, insisting they gather at the old house, Elora's house, before the lawyers began the official estate process. The place had been locked since her death, dust settling over the memories no one wanted to touch. The moment Maya turned the key, the familiar creak of the door sounded like a voice from the past. The air inside was stale, tinged with lavender sachets and something metallic, like old coins. The curtains were drawn, the living room caught in a half-light that made every shadow look deeper. They moved slowly, almost reverently, through the rooms. Lena trailed her fingers over the arm of the sofa, where the fabric had worn thin from years of Elora's touch. Jordan hung back, shoving his hands into his pockets like he didn't want to get too close to anything. It was in the study that they found it. Maya noticed the framed photographs first. Decades of birthdays, holidays, and awkward family portraits, all lined up along the bookshelf. But one in particular caught her eye. It was a group photo taken in the backyard on some long-forgotten summer afternoon. She recognized herself, Jordan, Lena, but there was something odd. One face, on the far edge of the frame, was blurred. Not from time or damage, but intentionally. She pulled the frame down and stared closer. The blur wasn't smudged by accident, it was painted over. The strokes were delicate, precise, but deliberate. "What the hell?" Jordan said, stepping closer. "That's not the weirdest part," Maya replied, pointing to the bottom right corner. There, in the blurred figure's hand, was a pendant. Lena's voice caught. Yes, Maya said. "It's the same pendant she was buried with." A sudden heaviness filled the room. Jordan tried to laugh it off. "Could be anyone. Maybe it's just a trick of the—" But Lena was already moving toward the desk, pulling open drawers. Inside the top one, beneath stacks of yellowing bills and brittle envelopes, was a small black notebook. On the first page, In Alora's looping script were 3 words: "Follow the pendant." They looked at each other. No one spoke. Lena flipped the page, but it was blank. Every page after that was blank. "It's a message," Maya said, her voice low. "A starting point." Jordan rolled his eyes, but his shoulders were tense. "A starting point to what? We don't even know who that is in the photo." The question hung in the still air, unanswered. As they left the study, Lena slipped the notebook into her coat pocket without a word. Hours later, the graveyard groundskeeper would swear he saw someone digging near Alora's plot. The next morning, the pendant would be gone, and whoever had taken it had just stepped into their lives, and someone just dug it up. The morning was gray and wet, the kind that seeped into your bones no matter how tightly you wrapped your coat. Maya stood at the edge of the cemetery path, her boots sinking into the damp earth. She hadn't planned to come here, not so soon after the funeral, but sleep had been impossible. The image of that blurred face in the photograph kept flashing in her mind. And the pendant. Always the pendant. The path was quiet except for the soft patter of rain dripping from the branches above. She passed rows of tilted headstones, their names faded, some swallowed by moss. Then she saw it, Alora's grave. But she wasn't alone. A man stood in front of the fresh mound of earth, his back to her. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark coat that looked almost black against the muted sky. In his hand, he held a bouquet of lilies, white, flawless, too perfect to have been bought from anywhere nearby. He knelt slowly, placing the flowers at the base of the headstone. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small envelope. Maya froze. He set the envelope against the stone, tucking it beneath the flowers as though hiding it from the wind. His gloved hand lingered on the top of the headstone for a moment, fingers tracing the carved name as if in farewell. When he finally turned, Maya caught the edge of his profile. Sharp, deliberate features that didn't belong to a stranger she could forget. He stopped when he saw her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment they just looked at each other. The rain filled the silence between them. "Who are you?" Maya asked, her voice sharper than she intended. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, his gaze locked on hers. "You're her daughter." The words felt less like a statement and more like an accusation. Maya's pulse kicked up. "And you?" He glanced at the grave. "Someone who knew her better than you did." Before she could respond, he moved past her, brushing by close enough for her to catch the faint scent of cedar and rain-soaked wool. She turned, watching his back as he walked toward the line of trees at the far end of the cemetery. Something made her call after him. "Wait!" He stopped, half-turned, and studied her for a moment longer. Then, with the faintest trace of a smile, he said just 2 words, "See you." And then he was gone, swallowed by the trees. Maya hurried to the grave, kneeling in the wet earth. She pulled the envelope from beneath the lilies, her fingers trembling. Inside was a single slip of paper with handwriting she didn't recognize, but it was written in the same flowing style as the postscript in Alora's letter. It read, "Family isn't always chosen. Sometimes it's revealed." At the bottom was a name, just one. It wasn't a name Maya knew, but it felt like the beginning of something that could unravel everything. Her breath caught as she realized, this man wasn't just visiting, he was watching. And what he calls them will shake their identities. The meeting at the lawyer's office had started tense and only worsened. Rain streaked the windows, the sound muffled under the steady hum of the heating system. The 3 siblings sat around a polished oak table that felt too large for them, each keeping their eyes fixed anywhere but on each other. The lawyer, Mr. Alden, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Given the nature of your mother's letter and the potential for another legal heir, we need to verify certain matters. I strongly recommend DNA testing for all involved." Jordan leaned back in his chair, scoffing. "This is ridiculous. We're her kids. She raised us. End of story." Maya's gaze was sharp. "You think she'd invent something like this? After she's gone?" "This isn't about feelings, Jordan. It's about facts." Lena sat quietly between them, twisting the silver ring on her finger, her mind replaying the man at the graveyard, the envelope, the strange name on the note. She could still hear the way he'd said, "You're her daughter." The emphasis had been wrong. Too pointed. Mr. Alden slid 3 sterile DNA kits across the table. It's a simple cheek swab. We'll handle the rest discreetly. Jordan muttered something under his breath but took his kit. Maya opened hers immediately, swabbing the inside of her cheek with brisk, practiced movements. Lena hesitated, staring at the white cotton tip like it might bite her. The samples were sealed, labeled, and handed back to the lawyer. He promised results within a few days, though his tone carried the weight of someone who already suspected they'd bring trouble. Those days dragged. Maya buried herself in work but kept her phone within reach at all times. Jordan avoided calls entirely, as if not answering might delay the inevitable. Lena found herself wandering through Alora's house again, flipping through photo albums, searching for signs she'd missed. On the 3rd afternoon, the call came. They gathered again in the lawyer's office, the same rain-soaked windows framing the tense scene. Mr. Alden sat with a manila folder in front of him, his expression carefully neutral. "The results are in," he said. "2 of you are biologically related to Alora. 1 of you is not." The words fell into the room like glass shattering. Jordan laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Yeah, sure. Who is it then? Who's the odd one out?" Mr. Alden opened the folder, glanced at the page, and looked up. "It's you." The silence was immediate, thick. Jordan blinked, the laugh dying in his throat. No, that's not possible." Maya's lips parted, but no words came out. Lena's eyes darted between them, her heart thudding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Mr. Alden slid the results across the table. "The test is conclusive." Jordan didn't look at the paper. He pushed back his chair, standing so quickly it scraped against the floor. "You're telling me my entire life is a lie? That I'm, what? Some stray she picked up?" No one answered. Maya reached for the file, scanning the details, and that's when she saw it. Another document, tucked behind the results. A diary entry in Alora's handwriting. The top line read, "If they ever find out, tell them to read the red journal." The blood drained from Maya's face. The red journal was hidden, and they all knew where. And Alora's diary will tell you why. The red journal was exactly where they remembered it, tucked high on the top shelf of Alora's wardrobe, behind a stack of neatly folded shawls she never wore. It was bound in worn leather, the corners frayed, the once bright red faded to a deep rust. When Lena pulled it down, a small puff of lavender-scented dust escaped, carrying with it the faintest trace of her mother's perfume. They sat together on the floor of Alora's bedroom, knees touching, the journal between them. The curtains were drawn, the only light a sliver of gray seeping through the gap, slicing across the wood floor like a thin blade. Maya took a deep breath and opened it. Alora's handwriting filled the pages in dense, looping lines, each letter deliberate, almost ornamental. The first entry was dated 24 years ago. "I have made a terrible choice. I cannot undo it. I must live with it." The words sent a shiver through Lena. She glanced at Jordan, who sat stiff, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the page as if trying to burn the words into memory. Maya read aloud, her voice steady despite the quickening pulse in her throat. "I was lonely. Your father was gone more than he was home. I met someone who saw me, who listened, who made me feel alive again." She paused, glancing at Jordan. His gaze didn't waver. It was not supposed to happen. But it did. And from that night forward, nothing was the same. The next entries grew more erratic. Some days were covered in ink so heavy it bled through the pages. Others were short, frantic notes. "He's calling again. I told him it's over. He doesn't believe me." Then a name appeared, just 1 letter. A. A says he will come for the baby. I told him he cannot. It's not his. He says it doesn't matter. The 3 of them exchanged uneasy glances. Jordan broke the silence. "So this, that's who she was afraid of?" Maya kept reading. "I sent the money again. If it keeps him away, it's worth it. But he knows too much. He knows about the other one." Lena's heart stumbled over the words. "The other one." Her hands curled into fists against her knees. "If anything happens to me, keep the children away from him. He is dangerous. He does not forgive. And if they ever meet, he will tell them things they can never unhear." The final pages grew sparse, the handwriting shakier. The last full entry read, "I saw him today." He smiled at me like he already knew how this ends. The remaining pages were blank, save for a faint ring of dried tears staining the last sheet. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the words pressing against them. Maya closed the journal carefully, her fingers lingering on the worn leather cover. "We need to find out who A is." Jordan's voice was flat, cold. "We already know one thing. He's not gone." Outside, a branch scraped against the window, making Lena jump. Somewhere deep inside, she knew the diary wasn't just a warning. It was a countdown. Next episode, you meet A. The name came from an unexpected place, an old neighbor who had lived next to Alora for nearly 40 years. Mrs. Keaton was in her 80s now, her voice thin and tremulous, but her memory sharp as cut glass. Maya had gone to see her alone, figuring the old woman might be more willing to talk without Jordan's sarcasm or Lena's quiet intensity in the room. She poured them both tea in mismatched china cups, her hands shaking only slightly as she set them on the coffee table. "You're asking about him," Mrs. Keaton said, her gaze flicking toward the window as if the very mention could summon something unwelcome. "Your mother never spoke his name to me, but I knew. I knew because of the way she changed after he left." Maya leaned forward. "Who was he?" The old woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "Your father's brother, Adrian." Maya froze, the name heavy in her chest. She had no memories of an Adrian. He'd never been part of their family gatherings, never in the stories their father told. Mrs. Keaton went on. "He was charming, too charming. The sort of man who could make you feel like the only person in the room. But there was something dangerous. Your mother knew it. Everyone did." The story unfolded in hushed tones. Adrian had vanished 20 years ago after a scandal no one in town dared speak of. Rumors swirled, illegal dealings, threats, a woman who disappeared, and then nothing. But Mrs. Keaton's voice dropped even lower when she said, "He didn't vanish. He changed his name, moved 2 towns over. I saw him once, years later, in a cafe on Willow Street. And he wasn't alone. He had a boy with him." Maya's breath caught. The boy, the hidden sibling. She left Mrs. Keaton's house with the name Adrian echoing in her ears. By the time she got back to Alora's, Jordan and Lena were already waiting, restless. She told them everything. Jordan's reaction was immediate, visceral. "He's our uncle and Mom's lover?" His voice was half disbelief, half disgust. "It fits," Lena murmured, pacing the room. "The diary, the money, the fear. And if he raised the hidden sibling?" She trailed off, her face pale. They decided to find him. It wasn't hard. Mrs. Keaton's cafe sighting was the breadcrumb they needed. Maya found a business license in a nearby town under a different surname, but the man in the photo was unmistakable. Tall, sharply dressed, eyes that seemed to look right through you. When they finally saw him in person, it was in the dim light of a small-town bar, the kind of place that smelled of whiskey and rain-soaked coats. Adrian sat at the end of the counter, a drink in hand, speaking in low tones to a young man beside him. The moment the siblings walked in, Adrian looked up. A slow, knowing smile curved his lips, as if he had been expecting them. "Family reunion," he said, his voice smooth and warm, with a dangerous undertone. "And here I thought you'd never come." The young man beside him turned, and in his eyes, they saw a reflection of Alora's past and their future unraveling all at once. He was the hidden sibling. But the child's mission will shock you. The air inside Mr. Alden's office was stifling, thick with the scent of leather-bound books and stale coffee. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the windows, but in here, the stillness was almost oppressive. All 4 siblings, Maya, Jordan, Lena, and the newly revealed 4th, Aiden, sat in a strained half-circle around the lawyer's desk. Adrian wasn't there, but his absence felt deliberate, like a hand hovering just out of sight, ready to tip the board at the right moment. Mr. Alden cleared his throat, shuffling a set of legal documents. "Your mother's will has a unique stipulation. The estate, including the house, assets, and trust fund, can only be released if all of her children," his eyes flicked toward Aiden, "agree to sign together. No signatures, no inheritance. That includes any future claims." Jordan scoffed. "So if one of us refuses, we all get nothing? Great. Who writes this kind of thing?" "Your mother," Alden said evenly. Maya's stomach tightened. "So what if one of us doesn't want the money?" Mr. Alden looked directly at Aiden. Then no one gets anything. The room fell silent, the truth landing heavy. Aiden leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. It's interesting, isn't it? You ignored her for years, and now suddenly the money matters. His voice was calm, measured, but there was a glint in his eyes that made Lena shift uncomfortably. Jordan's jaw tightened. What do you want? Aiden smiled faintly, as if the answer amused him. The truth. All of it. About why one of you doesn't belong here at all. Lena froze. Maya felt her pulse in her throat. Jordan's hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. Aiden leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'll sign. But first, you tell me who's the fraud, and you tell me why. Maya shot a glance at Mr. Alden. You can't just... But Alden raised a hand. I'm only here to explain the terms. How you meet them is up to you. Aiden stood, slow and deliberate, tucking his hands into the pockets of his dark coat. I'm not here for her money. I'm here for something she stole. When I get it, I'll sign. Until then, you're locked out. Jordan pushed his chair back violently. You can't hold us hostage like this. Aiden's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm not holding you hostage. I'm giving you a choice. You want the inheritance? Prove you're worth it. Prove you're hers. He turned and walked toward the door, his boots striking the hardwood with the precision of someone in control. At the threshold, he paused. And just so you know, the clock's ticking. Adrian doesn't wait forever. The door shut with a quiet click, but the sound felt final, like a lock sliding into place. Maya stared at the papers on the desk. The inheritance had been reduced to a trap, one that could only be sprung if they gave Aiden exactly what he wanted. And what he wanted might destroy them. And that reveal is deadly. The tension between them had turned into something corrosive, eating through every attempt at civility. For days, they circled each other like wary predators, trading clipped sentences and silent accusations. Every phone call went unanswered. Every knock on the door met with hesitation. Maya tried to keep the peace, but the cracks were spreading too fast. Jordan was furious, pacing like a caged animal, refusing to be tested any further by Aiden's smug conditions. Lena withdrew completely, speaking only when pressed, her eyes shadowed with something Maya couldn't read. Aiden, of course, was the calm center of the storm. He came and went without warning, his presence a reminder that their mother's fortune and her truth were dangling just out of reach. He never pressed, never threatened outright, but every glance, every measured pause, carried an unspoken challenge. Who will break first? The answer came late one night. Maya was at home, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, when her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a local news site. Exclusive. Scandal in Elora Vance estate. Fourth heir emerges with shocking claims. Her stomach dropped. She clicked the link. There it was. Everything. The letter from the funeral, the existence of the hidden sibling, and most damning of all, the DNA revelation that one of them wasn't Elora's biological child. The article didn't name which sibling, but it didn't need to. The damage was already done. Her phone rang before she could process it. Jordan, did you see it? His voice was a mix of panic and rage. Yes, she whispered. But how? It was Lena, Jordan snapped. It had to be. She's the only one who... But before he could finish, another voice came on the line. Calm? Controlled. Actually, Aiden said, it was me. The silence was suffocating. Maya's grip on the phone tightened. Why? Aiden's tone was almost bored. Because you weren't moving fast enough. I don't care about your embarrassment, I care about the truth. And now, the truth is out. Which means the rest is coming whether you want it or not. Jordan exploded on the other end of the line. You think this helps you? You've just made it impossible for us to... Aiden cut him off. No, I've made it impossible for you to hide. That's different. He hung up. By morning, the story had spread beyond the local press. Family friends called. Old neighbors texted. Strangers on social media speculated about the fraudulent child. The siblings couldn't go anywhere without feeling eyes on them. In the chaos, Maya caught sight of Lena in the kitchen, sitting in the dark, her face pale. You knew this was coming, Maya said quietly. Lena didn't look up. No, I just knew it wouldn't end quietly. Across town, Aiden stood outside a modest, weather-worn house. He looked at the door for a long moment before knocking. When it opened, the man who stood there was older now, but unmistakable. Adrian. "You ready?" Adrian asked. Aiden's smile was faint but dangerous. "She ruined our mother. Now we ruin hers." This wasn't about family anymore. It was about revenge. Now the final truth will burn it all down. The storm rolled in without warning, the sky bruised purple and gray, rain lashing against the windows of Alora's old house. Inside, the siblings gathered for what felt like the last time. Maya, Jordan, Lena, and Aiden, each looking as if they'd been dragged there by invisible strings. Adrian stood in the corner, his presence looming, his eyes sharp and calculating. Mr. Alden sat at the dining table, a small velvet box in front of him. "This," he said, tapping it lightly, "was found in your mother's belongings after the estate inventory. She instructed that it be given only when you were all together." No one moved. Finally, Maya reached out and opened the box. Inside was the pendant, the same one from the blurred photograph, the same one buried with Alora, and somehow, now, returned. She lifted it carefully, feeling its cold weight in her palm. "There's something inside," Lena said. Maya's fingers found the tiny seam along its edge. With a soft click, the pendant split open. Inside was a rolled piece of parchment, yellowed with age. She unrolled it slowly, her eyes scanning the words written in Alora's unmistakable handwriting. "If you are reading this, the truth can no longer be hidden." The letter began like a confession. Alora spoke of her mistakes, her affair, her fear of Adrian. But then the words took a sharper turn. One night, there was a storm like this one. 2 babies were born in the same hospital ward, one mine, one not. There was confusion, and I made a choice that cannot be undone. Maya's breath hitched. I switched them. I told myself it was for the best. One child went home with me. The other, to a life I thought would be safer. Her eyes darted to Jordan, to Lena, to Aiden, the truth beginning to take shape like a shadow emerging from fog. The one I raised as mine was never mine at all. Jordan's face went pale. His lips parted, but no sound came out, and the child I gave away is standing here now. All eyes turned to Aiden. His expression didn't change, but his grip on the edge of the table tightened. "Which means," Adrian said, his voice smooth, "you two are brothers." He nodded between Aiden and Jordan. "And the rest? Just bystanders in our story." The words hit like a blow. Maya's voice trembled. "So all of this, the letters, the tests, the will, it was just to force us into the same room. For what? Closure?" Aiden's gaze was cold. "Not closure, justice. She took me from my mother. Adrian raised me to remember that. And now, everything she built is ours." Lena's hand covered her mouth, her eyes shining with something between horror and pity. "You've been planning this from the start. From the moment I learned my real name," Aiden said. Outside, the storm raged, the wind howling against the glass like it wanted in. Inside, the truth sat between them like a living thing. Ugly, undeniable, and permanent. Jordan stared at the pendant still lying on the table. "So what now?" he asked, his voice hollow. Aiden's smile was small, almost tender. "Now, you choose. Blood or loyalty." No one spoke. The rain hammered harder. Somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard creaked, and the light above them flickered, just once, before settling into a steady, cold glow. Whatever choice they made, nothing about their family would ever be the same again.